In this video, I'd like to talk about supplementary, complementary, and vertical angles. So these are three types of angles that often come up when studying geometry. And you can see below I have the definitions for each of these. So let's start with supplementary angles. So these are two angles that add up to 180 degrees. So if you have a line that is also split by some other line, then the two angles that essentially make up this line, so this could be, let's say, angle X, and this could be angle Y, these two angles are what we call supplementary. They're going to add up to 180 degrees. So we can say angle X plus angle Y is equal to 180. So these come up often since you do have a lot of lines when studying geometry, and many times you need to know the angles that form completely around the line. So a common example you might see with this, let's say we again have this situation where you have a line and some other line cutting into it. If, let's say, this angle right here was 110 degrees, and you know that these two angles together form the angle of a line, then you know they're supplementary. You know that they're going to add up to 180. So you can set up an equation. If we, let's say, call this angle A, then you would have this 110 degree angle plus angle A is equal to 180 degrees. And you can subtract 110 from each side to find that angle A would be 70 degrees. So this is a common example for supplementary angles and when you need to find some missing angle. Now, complementary angles are when the two angles add up to 90 degrees. So this is when you have some right angle that is split into two other angles. So let's say this is a right angle and it's split in some way. So we could mark that this is a right angle. We can use a little corner or a box for that. And let's call this angle B and angle C. So complementary angles, we have that angle B plus angle C is equal to 90 degrees. So they add up to a right angle. And a common example you might see for this type of problem, let's create another right angle here, and we'll split this with some type of line. So let's say we know one of these angles, maybe, and we do know this is 90 degrees, but maybe this is 28 degrees, and we want to find this angle right here, which let's call it D. So we can set up an equation since we know these are complementary. They both add up to a right angle here. So angle D plus 28 degrees is equal to 90 degrees. So we can solve this equation. We could subtract 28. So that would be 62 degrees. So angle D is 62 in this case. And lastly, we have vertical angles. And vertical angles are formed when you have two intersecting lines, and we're talking about the angles opposite from each other. So let me just make a little bit more room here. So if we have two intersecting lines, then the angles opposite each other are called vertical angles. So let's just label these as maybe 1, 2, 3, and 4. So 1 and 3, these would be vertical angles. We can label them with this yellow marking. And vertical angles are equal to each other. So we can say angle 1 is equal to angle 3. But we also have another pair of vertical angles here. So angle 2 and angle 4. These are also vertical, and they are also equal to each other. So no matter how you draw these intersecting lines, you will always end up with this situation where the ones opposite each other are equal. And you can even see this is visually true. Since notice the opposite ones here, these are both very wide angles, and the opposite ones here, these are both very small angles. So a common problem, let me delete those markings really quick. A common problem might be that maybe this is 130 degrees and you need to find angle, we'll call this angle F. So since they are vertical, we can assume that angle F is 130. And vertical angles and supplementary angles often show up together since now we know how to figure out the other missing angles here. Since notice this angle, this 130, and this extra piece here, these form the angles of a line. So they're going to be supplementary. So we can find this missing angle because these two add up to 180 degrees. And so if we set up our equation like we did here, we can find out that this would be 50 degrees. Since 50 plus 130, they do add up to 180. So these three angles, these are very common when studying geometry. So let's look at one example problem. And for this problem, we need to find the relationship between angles A and B. So notice here's A and here's B. And it looks like we're told this angle here, EAB, this is a right angle. So we know this is 90 degrees. And we know that we have a line here. So EAB, B, and A, these all form the angles of a line. So the entire angle there is 180 degrees. So if this is 90, then A and B together would also be 90 degrees. Since, if you think about this, for this entire angle, EAD, to be 180, since it's the angle of a line, then this has to be 90 and this has to be 90, since that adds up to 180. So when we add those together, angle B and angle A, we get 90 degrees. And we know that when two angles add up to 90, we call this complementary. Now, we don't have enough information to determine what exactly A and B are, but since we know they add up to a right angle, we can at least assume that they're complementary angles.